Welcome to today's Women's Mentoring Program, our last one for the year. It's hard to believe that we're going to be rounding the corner and going into 2022. It just seems odd to hear that. Nonetheless, we're excited to start our day with you today. I'm Dionne Neubauer, Director of the Chamber of Commerce, and today's program is focused on new career paths, lifestyles, and adventures. Our intergenerational panel will share with us how they reprioritize their lives over the past year. Today's program topic was created with the help of Julie Brown, recently retired, who's also served as a panelist and moderator, and we'll hear from her in just a few minutes. So our program today is meant to be conversational, as if we're all gathered together in a living room. Those who have been with us before, even before COVID, we were meeting in person at the Birchaven Clubhouse. So we would appreciate your input today as we get ready to plan for next year's Women's Mentoring Program. Do you like the virtual concept, or would you like to be in person for next year? So think about that throughout the hour. And if you have thoughts, please drop them in the chat box, because we would love to hear your input, because that'll be very helpful as we plan for next year. So if during the program, if you have any questions, comments, or again, interest in person or keeping it virtual, we would love to hear about that. So again, use that chat box, because Julie, Emily, and I will be monitoring that area throughout the hour. A couple of housekeeping notes. We encourage you to keep your cameras on if you like. However, we do ask that you mute your microphone. So if you can take a minute just to check to see if you are muted, we would appreciate that. This program is expected to last till about 9 a.m. this morning. So we also encourage you to connect with each other, the panelists one-on-one, or even log into the Facebook group that we created earlier this year. So either through Facebook, Chamber's newsletter, or other social media aspects, you can be connected to see what's going on, when the next program will be held. And in fact, in just a few weeks, we will be hosting an in-person women's luncheon with Sarah Best with Real Good Ventures, and you'll hear more about that from Julie Brown in just a moment. So I've been talking about Julie Brown, so let's introduce her so she can help kick things off, and she'll introduce our moderator. So Julie, I'm going to hand it right over to you.
Okay, thanks, Dionne. Thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and we hope you get a lot of value out of today. When Dionne and I got together a year ago to plan this year, we never thought this would be a topic. You know, everyone changing jobs and retiring, or, just making these big life changes. So thanks to our panelists today, who have made some really bold changes in this last year and a half, for joining us and being willing to share their story. This is also a topic that's near and dear to my heart, because I planned to retire at the end of 2022. When the pandemic started, I was like, I just didn't feel like I could take my health for granted, and I had a lot of fun things I wanted to do. So I retired early because of all this. So I didn't see it coming in my own life, let alone across the country. So last night, Dionne called and said, you get to introduce Jen Swartzlander. So this is the part, she's our facilitator today. And this is the part where she's probably getting really nervous because we have a long history of pranking each other. So Jen is a licensed independent social worker. She's been in our community, working in our community almost 30 years. She's for a long time at Hope House, ended as the assistant director there. She was the director of Children's Mentoring Connection. She was a Finley franchisee for Shirley's Popcorn. So she did add a lot of value to all our lives by bringing Shirley's to Finley. And I was trying to think of one prank thing to say. So when I was watching Jeopardy last night, because that's what you do when you retire, is I was thinking the three categories that I think Jen could run the table on are, you getting nervous, Jen? Seinfeld, true crime podcast, and she's probably be pretty good at the Bible too. So I'd like to turn it over to Jen, and thank you for facilitating today.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate that. I don't know. That seems like a weird combination. True crime, Seinfeld, and the Bible. I don't know. But I appreciate that. Those are three things I really enjoy. I'm also very excited about this topic today. As a social worker, I love to kind of think through about what people are doing and why and how different things impact people. And this pandemic is rich with lots of things to think about. And I'm very excited about our panel. They come from a diverse background and diverse age groups, as Dionne said, and they've made some bold changes. And so I'm very excited for you to have an opportunity to meet them. We'll start by them doing a little self-introduction. So Cassie, we'll start with you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Cassie Turner. I'm the Community Engagement Officer with the Community Foundation. I've been off and again in Hancock County most of my adult life. Went to college here, left, came back, worked for the Boy Scouts, left, came back and worked for Extension, and now have moved over to the Community Foundation. So I'm excited to be here and looking forward to this conversation today.
Welcome, Cassie. And Maggie Brown.
Maggie Brown. I have been back in Hancock County for about a year now. I currently work at Family Resource Center. For the first year, I was the Suicide Prevention Project Director, managing that federal grant. In the last month, I switched over to a different federal grant called the Certified Community Behavioral Health Center Project. So I just moved into that role in the last month.
Great. Welcome, Maggie. And Shannon George.
Good morning. I'm Shannon George, owner and operator of Buckeye Family Farms outside of Arcadia. My husband and I operate a crop insurance agency, and we are also grain crop farmers raising corn and soybean, wheat, and most recently our new adventure popcorn. So in March of 2020, when everything seemed to be coming to an end, we thought diversifying our operation would be a good idea and to try something new. So we decided to grow and sell popcorn from our farm, and fast forward a year and a half later, we're now in the growing stages of running a small business, selling our popcorn, which has now evolved into selling other fun popcorn items like poppers, oil, and we are going to be even doing gift baskets for the holidays. So it's been a huge learning experience. So looking forward to this morning with hearing from everybody and learning from others as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Welcome. And Karen Bishop is our final panelist.
Good morning. My name is Karen Bishop, and my life doesn't sound quite as exciting as everybody else's, but I've been a nurse for 40 years, and all of those years have been here in Findlay, mostly at Blanchard Valley Health System. So I recently retired at the beginning of the year and have found all sorts of adventures to get into. So thank you for having me.
Welcome, Karen. I don't know a nurse that isn't rich with stories, and they're usually not for the faint of heart. So I think you probably have a lot to add to this and have had an exciting career. So we look forward to hearing more. I had read an article from PR Newswire that shared that 70% of Americans started a new hobby during the pandemic. So I am curious of our panelists, if any of you started new hobbies, and if so, what were they?
Well, it wasn't a hobby per se. I guess it turned into one. I got a COVID puppy about a year and a half ago or a year ago. And when you get a German Shepherd Husky pup, that pet training becomes a very important hobby, lifestyle. So that's something, yes, me and Miss Daisy. So that's something we were doing.
Okay, Daisy, the puppy.
The big puppy.
Go ahead, Karen.
I actually started fishing with my sister, something I really had never done. And we just go up to Lake Erie and fish off the pier, and one day caught over 20 perch. So I learned to bait my own hook, and I can't take the fish off the hook yet. That's something I can't do yet, nor can we clean them. So we do have to take them into town and have them cleaned. But yeah, that's a new hobby and I really, really enjoy it. Very relaxing.
Great.
We actually bought a camper in December of 2019, not knowing obviously the pandemic would hit. So we enjoyed camping a lot summer of 2020 and this past summer. So that's been fun just in Ohio. So it's good experience with the kids, and my son loves to fish, but I don't fish. I leave that with my husband and my son. So good for you, Karen.
Our big life changes in the midst of a pandemic as we bought our first home. So that's kind of been, I guess, my most recent hobby is decorating and settling in and painting and all of those things that come with home ownership, the fun stuff and the not so fun stuff. We're learning and figuring that out.
Yeah, I think as you hear different people and the activities they do outdoors, and puppies and pets and remodeling have been amongst the most interesting and most common things that's happened during the pandemic. Interesting factoid from that same article, they said during the Great Depression, which many people are using some of the analogies from the Great Depression to match the pandemic experiences. The card game bridge is when that really emerged, was during the Great Depression as a hobby for people. Another little strange factoid, and I'll move on from that article, but they said, that article said, along with talking about the trends in new hobbies, that 14% of the people surveyed admitted to being nude at some point on Zoom in the last year and a half, which I thought was really interesting. I immediately did the math in my head. If we have 60 people on this, how many people, nude, not like pajama pants or messy buns. So anyways, strange article, but fun. Switching gears a little bit more about the topic at hand in terms of the new career paths and lifestyle changes. The Wall Street Journal also said that in the last year, we've really emerged from a year of introspection with a new perspective. And that has been the nudge that have made people choose a lifestyle change. And so let's begin with you, Maggie. I guess my question is, how has the pandemic changed the trajectory of your life?
Sure. I grew up in Cary, just starting at the beginning. And like a lot of 18-year-olds, I thought that I would go away for college and not come back. I thought I had life figured out at that point. That worked out pretty well for me. At the start of 2020, I was actually living in Pittsburgh. I was managing a few different homeless services programs there. And I was also planning a giant wedding with over 300 guests. So that's kind of where it set the scene of start of 2020. And we all know what happened after that. My husband and I, we still had a beautiful wedding. We had 10 guests instead of our 300 planned, had to make that big shift. And during that, we had spent some time with introspection and kind of, this one thing we've spent 18 months planning. And we were so happy to be married, but spent so much time and energy planning this one-time event for 18 months. And then it all fell apart so easily. And so that was really kind of our turning point of, let's start kind of thinking about what are our someday plans and let's do those now. So my husband's from Findlay. So one of our kind of someday plans is eventually maybe sometime we might move back. So we pushed up that timeline a bit. And within a month or two after we decided we were going to go ahead and move back home, I was able to get my job at the Family Resource Center. Julie put us up until we found our house. We stayed with Julie for a little while, and made that transition. So it was really kind of the pandemic was the factor that made us kind of put our someday plans into motion. Moved home. We have absolutely no regrets. Super grateful to be here. And I'm really happy that that was kind of, I think that was the change that we needed, and are happy to be back.
I love that. Probably one of my favorite quotes from the panel. We got together a week ago and talked about today's session, and that's one of my favorite quotes, the someday plans now. And I guess kind of the challenge for all of us is, do we have any someday plans that we want to move on sooner than later? Shannon, how has the pandemic changed your life?
Well, specifically with the pandemic, I have 3 kids. And when everything started to shut down in March, it gave us a better perspective of it's okay to say no to things. All my kids are in sports. Everybody wants to do all the activities. My husband's busy, I'm busy. And it was actually, although weird at the time, looking back those 3 months when nothing was going on and we spent 3 months together working on the farm together, no sports activities to hustle to, I realized how busy we were in the evenings after school. And one of the things we decided going forward from that is our kids don't have to be in everything. It's okay to say no and to prioritize what's really important with us and our family. So out of the pandemic, that's the main thing that was the prioritizing of our family first, and being okay with saying no, which is very hard for me. And I'm sure all of us, especially as women, is to say no. You don't have to do everything. So that was the big takeaway on that. So.
Great. Cassie, thoughts on how it's changed the trajectory of your life?
So I think Maggie and I were probably at different intersections. The beginning of 2020, I was in the midst of a messy divorce. And moving into 2020, thinking to myself, this is probably as crummy as it's going to get. And then 2020 happened. Okay. So I think the big thing that I learned going through is that a lot with like what Shannon was saying, you really started prioritizing what was really important, and self-care for me, making sure that, I was taking care of what I needed to take care of, really kind of became a focus in 2020, which is something I really had never focused on. I'm the 4-H educator for the county. I took care of 800 kids and everything else that was going on. So in some ways, while I would never recommend a divorce during a pandemic, it did help me prioritize the pandemic itself, helped me prioritize what was really important.
Julie put in the chat the refocus on self-care, and I think that's so important. And I think Cassie, you underlined Shannon's point about we don't say no enough and we don't take care of ourselves enough. So glad to hear that you are prioritizing yourself and taking care of yourself. Karen, how about you?
Gosh, being in the medical field was such a big challenge during COVID. I lost my husband right before COVID. So, when the whole COVID happened and I was working in a facility that visitors were shut off from their families, it was so heart-wrenching and sad, and to watch people die. And it really made me also think about what was important in my life, losing my husband, then watching other people succumb to COVID. I decided, it was time for me to retire. 40 years was a long time, but ending my career during COVID to me was really, really sad. You know, I was really torn between staying and helping everybody get through this, or leaving and taking care of myself and doing the things that, you know, I wanted to do, even though it was unfortunately without my husband, my retirement view totally changed because of course we had plans. So, you know, I had to change the plans and start looking for things to do for myself and take care of myself. So yeah, being in the medical profession during this time is just very difficult for nurses and doctors. And so it was a good time to leave. You know, I can honestly say that, but again, I was very sad to leave.
Thank you, Karen, for your service as a nurse. You know, it's hard to imagine what the life of the medical field has been like for not, you know, what we thought was going to be a short period of time, but a very long period, almost, you know, past a year and a half now. Yeah, the impact of COVID is just rippling, and we're hearing it through this panel, from you know, retirement to birthday parties to spending time with our loved ones, the wedding planning, all of that. There's been such a ripple impact. I'm curious to talk a little bit about the type of personal and professional support that you had during this time of these adjustments, of these changes. Karen, do you want to start?
I really think my support probably came from my immediate family, because obviously my husband wasn't here. So, and my friends and people encouraging me, you know, that, yeah, it's time. And unfortunately, my brother became ill. So I retired right in time to start taking care of my brother, which, you know, it's okay, go from one nursing job to the other, but it's all right, because family is what matters, and that's what comes first. And really encouragement from my immediate family and friends.
Great. Shannon, what type of personal and professional support did you have during the transition?
Same with Karen. A lot of immediate family support, and close friends, and also professionally reaching out to some of my past mentors and getting that, you know, when we're thinking about starting a business, all the negative thoughts come into your head. What if it doesn't work? What if we fail? And having that professional support to reach out to somebody to encourage you to do it. Lots of conversations between my husband and I, and really my mother as well. She's been a huge supporter. My mother just recently retired too from the medical field last year during the middle of the pandemic. So she had a lot of great feedback for me as well. So, but yeah, definitely friends that you've been friends with for a while that you can trust, and immediate family.
Great. How about you, Maggie?
Echoing the others, our immediate family was a huge support. Julie is my mother-in-law. That's why I lived with her. I didn't just knock on Julie's door and say, hey, can I stay with you for a while? So we stayed with her for a time. I stayed with my parents for a time. So they gave that kind of intense support and stabilization during a transitional period. One thing that was really, I think, helpful for me too is my previous boss in Pittsburgh was incredibly supportive. One of my big concerns with leaving is that it was a tough time in social services, like many sectors, especially in homeless services. There was a higher need and less resources available, new funding coming in that we were having to figure out. So it was a really intense time. And I was nervous and feeling guilty of, if I leave, who's going to fill this gap? You know, this is affecting people getting their basic needs in their real lives. And my previous supervisor was just so incredibly supportive and encouraging. She was that way throughout my time. And so that's something that I really take with me and plan to continue to take with me through my career, is how her support, even during a transition period where I was leaving the agency, how huge of an impact that had on me, and really kind of helped get me through that transitional period and prioritize what I needed to do for myself and my family.
That is a terrific supervisor, and a great experience early in your career to have that type of supervisor. Cassie, what are your thoughts?
So a second big transition for me was coming to the Community Foundation. I had worked in youth development majority of my adult career the past 15 years as a 4-H educator here in Hancock County, as well as in Meigs County in Southern Ohio. I've helped grow a lot of kids over the years and made some wonderful relationships and really loved what I did. I think for the most part, saw myself as a life for an extension. But one of the things that I always tell my teens is that, you need to check out opportunities when they come down your path, take those opportunities to interview and things like that. So when the opportunity for the Community Foundation position came up, and it really was everything that I'm very, very enjoy and like to do and could see some self, growing in, I had to take my own advice. I couldn't be hypocritical on that. And I think that relationship that I've had with those teens all those years has helped with that. Now, when it actually came to making that decision and when things actually started to shake out, I, between my immediate family and then a couple circles, and I think for me, my 2 circles of very close friends was huge. There was emergency powwow sessions and able to go back and forth and go through those, on a Zoom call or a Facebook call, going through all that and pros and cons and helping me stay a little focused on that. And then I think the thing that really put it over the edges, or once I made the decision, but I knew I had to start telling people, and I wanted to tell my camp counselors first, because this is a group of kids that I've worked with since, well, the oldest ones since they were tiny little people, and good group of kids. But they understood, they got it. I think we were that whole thing of taking those opportunities and willing and excited for me and sad, and we all cried a little bit. It was great. But I think that support circles, whether in being willing to put yourself out there in vulnerable positions to be able to talk things through. I think that helped me.
Yeah, I think, Cassie, you were probably one of the biggest surprises that transition, because you were so great in your prior role, and it seemed like such a big transition. And
what was funny is that the kids, I think, got it quicker than some of my adult volunteers. I think there was more, it was an easier transition for my teenagers. I mean, we have plenty of sad, and I've got a whole wall of notes that made me cry when I opened them up, but but you got to find what's the best fit, and as much as I loved extension, it was a lifestyle. It was not necessarily a job or a career. It was a lifestyle, and being willing to is that the lifestyle that I wanted for the next 15, 20 years? I didn't know, and this was an opportunity to then work things through. Yeah.
Kids are a lot smarter than adults a lot of times, aren't they? And they're quick to they're quicker with change. I think that's the bottom line. So
yeah, don't ever give kids a short stick. They're pretty savvy people when given the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, that's a nice segue. And I was sitting here and I was thinking, kind of what has happened with the pandemic is we've started to reassess what is our relationship to our job, and how do we balance work and family. And so I'm curious for the panel to talk about, how has your work life balance changed? You alluded to it a little bit, Cassie, but do you want to talk a little more about how that's changed?
I didn't realize there was stuff people did for themselves after 4 o'clock. I just thought you went to meetings, or you went and volunteered, with or worked through your volunteers, or you were at the fair, or you were doing whatever numerous programs. There's this stuff people call, it's called going to the gym, and you buy groceries on a normal time frame, and you might cook some food. It's not just going through a drive-through. So yeah, there's this life that happens outside of what's going on. So yeah, but in all seriousness, yeah, I really have been able to find some balance. You know, when your position, especially for mine, was working with volunteers and kids, you worked when they were available. So plus your regular stuff that's going on. Like I said, extension is a wonderful, wonderful world, but it is a lifestyle. And it's really nice to be able to find that balance, that I can go hang out with my family on the weekends, or have a social life and get together with my friends and do stuff that's not all extension all the time. Make plans without having to check the work calendar is hard. But yeah.
Yeah. Karen, what about you? How was work? Well, I guess work life has really changed now that I think that through, but talk a little more about it, maybe even in perspective to family and friends.
You know, people always say you're busier when you retire than you were when you were working. And I truly never believed that, but I am. You know, I've read more books than I probably have in my entire life. And like I said, I go fishing, I volunteer at the health department, I volunteer giving vaccines. Besides taking care of my brother, I enjoy going to dinner with friends. I truly have something on my calendar every day. And the most important thing is I never, ever get out of bed before 8 a.m. You know, I hear a lot of people say, you know, all during work, I got up at 6 a.m. and I still get up at 6 a.m. That wasn't true for me. Day one, I slept right through, you know, and now, you know, you don't set an alarm clock for anything except for fishing. So it's wonderful to be in that part of your life and to be able to focus on what you want to do and to give back to the community. Because especially being a nurse, you know, we're just geared to giving and caring. So I just found ways to continue to do that. And I've really, really enjoyed it. And like I told the panel the other day, the first thing I did was I literally cleaned out my whole house. I did one room a week and I emptied out every drawer and cabinet, and it's so refreshing. There's nothing better than to just purge everything. So yeah, I really, truly have been busier. I wonder how I even had time to work.
It's nice when you set your own agenda and your work becomes matters of your heart and the things, you know, you really enjoy. That's fantastic.
It is. Thank you.
Shannon, how about you? Work-life balance. You talked a little bit about that before with the kids and being able to say no. Other thoughts on the topic?
Yes. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm getting a notice. I think my internet was cutting out a little bit. So as far as the work-life balance, I actually had a pretty huge change before the pandemic hit. I worked in the healthcare industry on the business side of things for 13 adult yearhood years, which I consider those working years after college, until 2019, when I took the plunge and did a 180 and stopped working for the corporate world and started working for our family. I stopped to, well, there's a couple of reasons why I stopped. The main reason, I was working a lot of hours and not being home. I was connected to my phone all the time when I was home. We did not have a lot of remote work days at the time, and it just was crazy. And I was tired of working so much and making somebody else money. I thought, I can work this hard and make myself money for our family. So I quit working. I stopped to focus on my husband's insurance business at the time and the help on the farm, which in turn allowed me to also be home for our 3 kids. So it was a complete 180. And then now with the popcorn business, that's my project, my little side project that I get to do along with our other things with the farm. But that was the main focus. And now that I'm here, it's almost kind of turned into, I quit my 9 to 5 to work 24/7 because it's hard to turn off work when it's a lifestyle at the farm. But my husband and I are setting some boundaries, like when we're getting into bed, well, not right now since it's harvest time, but when he is home at a normal hour, when we're getting into bed and he just brings up, hey, we should try this, we should try that. And it's like 10:30 at night. And I'm like, I can't talk about it anymore. Like, we just have to shut it down. So now it's kind of relearning, and setting boundaries, I guess, of, okay, hey, it's time to turn off the farm. Let's focus on the kids for a second or talk about what we need to do. But yeah, it's kind of turned into more of a 24/7 lifestyle, but it's been good though, because I can just like, hey, it's 3 o'clock. The kids are getting off the bus pretty soon. It's time to take them to practice or help them with homework. So I definitely have the flexibility where I can, stop in the middle of the day, go run and get groceries, as Cassie was saying, at a normal time. Or, just being able to take them to doctor's appointments during the middle of the day and not having to worry about getting home from Tiffin or from Findlay and then running them back into town or doing whatever. So, so it's been a good shift, but still trying to figure out our boundaries too, as farming is definitely a lifestyle, but a fun one. So.
And when you enjoy working hard, it is a constant challenge to set those boundaries for yourself, for your family.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of fun too to work.
It is fun. And I will say we do involve, like when the kids are home from school, they do help. They help us a lot on the farm. My oldest is 12, almost 13. So she's learning how to drive equipment and be helpful, and all the kids help with our popcorn. So it's fun for them too. Well, they say it's fun until it's snack time or they need a break, they say. So
the hard work of farm kids, Cassie is a big proponent of that.
That's right.
Maggie, I'm interested about how work-life balance has changed for you.
So one of the big things that impacted my work-life balance, I think, is one of your future questions about remote work versus in-person work. I know for some folks, remote work made it harder to have boundaries, but it was actually a huge kind of reset for me. Prior to the pandemic hitting, I had found myself going into work earlier, staying later. I was kind of in the cycle of like, just one more thing before I leave, just one more thing before I leave. And because things were so hectic with staff and clients, I also would make the excuse of like, this is my quiet time. So I'd be the last one in the building because then it was actually quiet and I could get stuff done. So I had been pushing those boundaries for a while and staying later and going in earlier. And then when the abrupt shift came and I was working exclusively from home, I actually found it a lot easier to be able to close down when it was time to close down. I think having just more organic, actual quiet time to get the projects done that I needed to get done, being able to turn off my phone instead of having people bust into the office in their latest crisis. And one of the other things that helped is, again, just kind of prioritizing family and that balance. So it was really easy to shoot Eric a text and say, oh, I'm going to be late again, and not give the time and just show up at home when I got home, versus when I can hear him like in the other room starting to cook dinner. And then I'm like, oh, it's time. I need to close down. I need to go spend time with him and prioritize that. Like, this can wait. So that remote work was hugely beneficial in kind of resetting those boundaries for me and finding that balance. I'm back to working in person with Family Resource Center, but I was able to take those habits with me and not pick up kind of those bad habits of extending my day for unlimited amounts of time just to keep going.
Yeah, I think that was a big surprise for a lot of people. They weren't sure how they would feel about working remotely. And I think many were surprised that they enjoyed it as much as they did. I'd be curious for others on the panel, your thoughts on in-office work versus remote work, or other issues around, like deal breakers for you now in terms of your schedule or work expectations.
I think I was a lot like Maggie in that, there might be a 2-hour break in between when the workday was over and meeting started. So I would just stay and work through. When the pandemic hit and we were working remote, I shut my computer off and would just log back in for that 2-hour, for that window. I would take and step away and go play with my nieces or whatever else was going on, go for a run. And that was something that, we carried as things went through. I still personally prefer to be in the office as things are going, but that it's okay to work remotely now and again because life's happening and you need to be there or something's going on has been just this really like aha moment of, or there's no reason to drive in for an hour meeting when you can jump on Zoom in the middle of winter. There's, just that moving those barriers out of the way that it doesn't have, while in person's good, it doesn't always have to be in person. And when it doesn't make sense to be in person, why are we doing it? And asking that question and being able to do that part, I think that's been a huge takeaway for me.
I'll kind of piggyback off of what Cassie said. So we didn't really have with farming, there was really no remote work, but with the community meetings and committees that my husband and I are both involved in, to be able to Zoom in the middle of winter instead of actually driving somewhere, that was great. So I definitely enjoyed having that capability more so during COVID, to be able just to Zoom from home. Like, how convenient is that? Like, that's fantastic. So, but in the same sense, you do kind of miss that one-on-one connection. But I prefer Zoom versus having to get up early and drive somewhere for sure. And yeah, definitely. So I think it's been a good thing. And I know at my previous work that they all went remote. So it's definitely, I think companies figured out how to do that. And if anything good comes out of this, I would hope that more companies are embracing that work from home life and giving all workers that flexibility to have. I mean, I'm sure like if I was still working where I was, it would be fantastic just to get down at my desk at 8 o'clock with coffee in my hand, be able to go fill up my coffee whenever I need, go flip in some laundry, when I go to the bathroom real quick. So I think that was a huge benefit.
Yeah, I think that's a forever change from the pandemic. As a county organization that receives state and federal funding, we don't make that trip to Columbus anymore. It's all on Zoom. And, really for an hour or 2-hour meeting in Columbus, we were, that was requiring 3 or 4 hours of travel time. It seemed kind of silly. So I think that's a forever change, and people are experiencing that with a variety of trainings. We just have opportunity for trainings that might have been cost prohibitive in the past that are now available at our fingertips on Zoom. So it's been a fantastic change. I want to talk a little bit about liminal space. This has been a favorite terminology and something Julie and I have talked about for years. Liminal space, really that space between knowing that something's in the past or we're moving past something and what's in the future, but really kind of uncertain what that future holds. And I was kind of thinking about it, and in my bad sense of humor, I was comparing it to the timeout chair. We put kids in the timeout chair and say, think about think about what happened here in the past, and think about what you're going to do in the future. And liminal space is kind of uncomfortable, like the timeout chair. Like, it's a time where you got to sit with yourself, think about all those things. And I'm, you know, this panel has made some big changes in your life. And I'm wondering just what that experience was like for you in the actual part of deciding. Some of you talked about it. Cassie, you talked about it with the pros and cons, and your team of people that you would talk with. But can you talk, as a panel, can you talk about that emotional experience of being in that liminal spot of, I want to hold on, but I need to let go, and the excitement of the future, and kind of how all that is wrapped up into kind of an uncomfortable space for a period of time?
Sure, I'll go first. I think, like I mentioned before, it was hard to leave a job that I truly loved. But you're in the middle of COVID, you're in the middle of this whole mess, you're trying to make everybody happy. You know, the staff is getting sick, you know, you see people dying. I mean, it's such turmoil that you're really torn between, do I stay and continue to help, or do I back away and start to take care of myself? And there's a big financial issue. You know, you're making this amount of money while you're working, even though it is very stressful, but you're going to walk away and things are not going to be the same, you know, as far as health insurance, and even, you know, just your weekly paycheck is going to be different. So you struggle with that too. So for me, it was that whole messy middle, was trying to decide that I needed to walk away, that it was time to separate myself from all that stress, and life is just too short. I think we all know that, we realize that. And for me, transferring into that part of my life, I think that messy middle was trying to let go, and it is very difficult, but I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, I was horrible at it. I was horrible trying to make that transition. I legitimately worked another 6 weeks at Extension part-time, took my vacation, and then was working nights to cover things that I, in my mind, had to happen to move things forward, and then trying to deal with all of that. So I made my own nightmare of everything that I shouldn't be doing for about 6 weeks. And then when that kind of did reach the head, you know, when you sit back and you're evaluating what you just did it really make that much of a difference that you killed yourself for 6 weeks? And I think we all do that sometimes too, is that in that effort to take care of everybody, we don't take that time to evaluate what's it really going to impact on you. And then when you do sit back and look at it, you're like, well, that wasn't the smartest thing I ever did. So, you know, trying to navigate all that, I agree with Karen. That was some hard navigation of exiting a life, right? I mean, it was a long, and exiting that, and then when you're dividing yourself up in so many different ways, you're not giving fully of yourself in any one way. And that's something that I've had to learn, and that's been a lot of that processing, that I'm much better at my best when I'm not stretching myself so thin that nothing happens, or at least nothing that could be to the level that it could be.
Maggie.
My messy middle was kind of, I was looking at kind of closing the chapter of like young adulthood and moving into full-on adulting was my messy middle. You know, that was one of the things that was, I think, hard about the transition of living in the city and having the freedom to do whatever I wanted, and renting. So, you know, I moved for the last 10 years, I moved probably every year or two into a new apartment. And again, like I said, when we were chatting at the beginning, or taking on the responsibilities of home ownership, all of that. So that was kind of my messy middle of moving on from that kind of time of freedom and flexibility and moving into, like you said, full on adulting. But it's been wonderful. I mean, it's so good to be established, and it's good to be able to see our parents in the drop of a hat and fulfill kind of those family responsibilities and roles. I really look at those as blessings, and that we didn't get when we were living away from home. We're expecting our first baby, so that's full on adulting that's going to be coming up sooner rather than later. So it's all really good, exciting things, but it was really hard during that transition period, kind of grieving that closing of a chapter and lifestyle and moving on into a new chapter and lifestyle.
I'll kind of date it back to 2019 when I left my stable job. It took us probably a year of talking to actually build up the guts enough to just leave and cut ties. What was holding me back was, and Karen kind of touched on this, was the financial aspect of it. I carried the health insurance. I had a nice stable salary. And that was really tough to get past and be like, are we going to be okay if I do this? And what helped me get through that was, okay, I've been working for 13 years. I have this skill set that if I'm going to give this a year, if it's not working, I know I can always go back and get another job if I need to. And I wanted to try it. And the middle part of that was when I did leave, trying to figure out where my role was here with my husband too. I was in charge of projects at my previous job. I was in a leadership position. I wanted to run the show. So it was like relearning my specific roles here and being okay with that, with kind of taking a step back, so to speak, and working together and figuring out what was going to be the best for us. You know, my husband and I have two completely working styles. He's very type B. I am extremely type A. So it was learning how to work with him and be like, why don't you do it this way? You should be doing it that way. So kind of like, okay, take a step back, we'll get through it. So it was that transition time with actually kind of relearning each other and figuring out how to be more efficient together to grow our business. And then once we decided, hey, let's diversify and get into popcorn, I've kind of like assumed like that back into the leadership role of I'm in charge of that. And like, that's my project while still being able to be there for my family. And it has been an amazing experience. Am I making the same amount of money as I was before? Absolutely not. My goal is to do that as we grow our business. But luckily, we've been able to weather that financial roller coaster and it's working. And I'm very thankful for that. And I'm very blessed that we're able to do that. So it's been a wild ride, but it's been good. So
I hear a little bit of the process is a little bit about grief, letting go, and a little bit about readiness and about the excitement and embracing the future. So, which is certainly the process. I know we're out of time. Julie, I know there was a question in the chat about recommendations for somebody who's facing this. I don't know if any one of the panelists want to talk about any advice you have for somebody who's facing that big career change. Can we just end with maybe a quick comment on that?
Oh, sorry.
Jen, I've been thinking I'm going to jump in real quick because I did it too. And I was whining a lot to Jen. She was in my inner circle. And, she talked me into working with a therapist. And so that therapist was able to help me see what was real, what were stories I was telling myself. Like she helped me sort that out because I had some narratives that that, oh, everybody will think I'm a loser if I quit before I I said I'd stay this long. And so for me, that was really helpful to bring someone independent in. And I don't know, that was just a game changer, and it just clarified, it made everything crystal clear in probably 2 months' time. So I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything, but that's my pro tip.
I love that idea, and I wish I would have done that. Because you know, when you're struggling, your family's going to talk to you, but they're all going to try to sway you into, leaving and retirement. And then the people at work are just begging you to stay. So you need an outsider that'll say, okay, now listen, this is how it is. You've got to follow, your feelings and think about yourself. So that's a great idea. You should have told me about it.
Okay, you should have called Jen. She would have told you to do it. So, okay, well, we're almost at the 9 o'clock hour. So just a couple wrap up things. Please don't be afraid to connect with any of the panelists or people on here that you saw today. Touch base with Dionne or Emily if you need connected. When we used to have these at Birchaven, my goal was when I came in, I would say, in my mind, I'm going to go to coffee with one person here today. And not for any, other than maybe I think you're cool, or I wish I knew more about you. And if you ask, I guarantee everyone will say yes. I've never had anyone say no. So think about that. And you'll get a survey, and I know where everybody's like, well, more surveys, but right now is the time when Dionne and I need to start thinking about next year. So think about things you want to hear about next year, people you'd like to hear from. Just be super honest with us, whether you want it in Zoom format or at the Birchaven Clubhouse again. And then we have one more event this year, the Women's Leadership Forum on November 16th. It's at lunchtime. We actually get to see each other. We get to go to lunch together, have a yummy lunch. Is it at the Hancock Hotel, Dionne?
That's going to be at the Finley Country Club.
At the country club, we get a yummy lunch. And the speaker's named Sarah Best. She's from Toledo. She's worked with a lot of nonprofits in Hancock County. She is, I just can't say it, she is a spectacular human being. And just to breathe the same air with Sarah, I guarantee you will make your day better. Her topic is called, it's about the path to fulfillment, and she focuses on emotional intelligence and self-awareness. I know Family Resource Center has hired her to work with their leadership team right now. Many of you have maybe already met her, but there just aren't very many Sarah Bests in the world. So if you can possibly make that work, I promise that you'll be happy you did. So that's all I have today. Dionne, do you have anything you want to finish up with?
I'll just add that Emily has put a link in the chat area if you're interested in learning more about that luncheon. But otherwise, ladies, we appreciate you. We appreciate you opening and sharing your journeys with us. What a great way to start the morning. So wishing all of you a great rest of the day. And is it too early to say Happy New Year to all of you? Before you know it, it'll be Christmas and the holiday. But nonetheless, we appreciate all of you. So to our attendees and panelists, thank you so much for spending your hour to kick off your day with us. And keep an eye on your newsletter or social media for more information on other women's mentoring programs. So with that, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.